And I have to say, I was really thrilled when I heard that the theme would be something so entirely up my alley. The idea of saints and sinners. May I see a show of hands? How many of you went to Catholic school? We are legion. And the number of poets who are former Catholics, lapsed Catholic, is also legion, and I count myself among that group, which means I have all kinds of fodder for poems. So I'm going to start off with a poem that I actually wrote when I was an undergraduate, which is many years ago, when I first began to understand what my 12 years of Catholic school, going to Mass no less than 6 days a week for years of my life, had given me in terms of my sense of language. So this is called Only Say the Word and I Shall Be Healed. I started a dinnertime rhyming game. Muck, nuck, luck, duck, huck, fuck, and learned the power of a word from the looks on their faces. Each night we Hail Married and Our Fathered away the day's bruises. Me and God getting Mom's undivided attention for all 97 words. I watched the priest raise Christ. His words, the rhythm, my knees wobbling, I fainted right there on the altar. Mother said it was that I hadn't eaten breakfast, but I knew the power of those words. And if Mass had still been in Latin, who knows, I might have ignited right there from the sheer brilliance of the syllables. But I was born too late for that kind of miracle. Thank you. You may know that nuns are also known as the brides of Christ. So this is a very short poem from the child's perspective about visiting the convent, and it's called In the Bride's House. We know nuns' bodies do not function like ours. Sister Carlotta can blow her nose all day and never exhaust the one tissue she keeps tucked in the left cuff of her light blue cardigan. You know, and then there's another side of being a child who takes everything quite literally and lives in a culture, if you will, where it's possible that some people are saints and that one might actually receive visitations from saints. It also means that sainthood is tenuous. So this is called For Lost Sainthood. Because when the Virgin appeared, she said nothing, just waved. Less hello than come this way. A third grade girl, a faith-fevered girl. I pledged my unknown, ungovernable body, consecrated my virginity to hers. But already I knew I burned. Before knowledge, before even the barest mechanics, before the trance-like tidal pull of sweat and flesh, I burned, and already I knew I was not good. For all my hot, true tears when the host was raised as Jesus' flesh, for all my prayers and carefully counted rosary beads, I knew I burned. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle and then come back. Please welcome Michelle Peñaloza.
Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you to Susan and Harold and Katy for having me here. And it's so lovely to read with Elizabeth again. So I also am I don't know if you guys saw me raise my hand, but I'm also a lapsed, I like to say recovering Catholic. I went to Catholic school K through 12, and I'm Filipino American, so Catholicism is like birthright, pretty much, too. So I'll just begin. Thread right. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Thread right. I pluck silver and white hairs from Lola's head, each one for a penny, as she sits at her singer. Bridesmaids' dresses and wedding gowns drape from the ceiling, down from hooks meant for hanging plants. Sundays beneath Santo Niño and Santa Maria, beneath the flaming thorned heart of Christ, Lola and I and her altars and her trilling singer. She pieces together lined panels of gowns while I pull triplets of silver and white from thick black. Triplets of silver and white, easy to find in the altar light. Her hair smells like simmering sinigang. She and Ma whisper fierce below Santo Niño's painted eyes, words I do not know. I will buy a jawbreaker with the pennies Lola will pay me. I don't remember their words, only their cross faces. Their mouths move quick, twisting in ire. These faces, someday, my mother and I will make. We will twist our mouths, angry lines stifled, saying and not saying what we mean. Lola hums. White and silver hairs gather upon satin, ruby, coral, cerulean, left over from finished gowns. My fingertips massage her crown. Lola hums a song from her throat to her skull to my fingers. Each errant hair I pluck, a line in a sketch in a dream where we divine patterns upon red shantung. The song she will sing, the room where she will die. Ma will ask everything aloud. Lola will not answer. We wait for thread and needle, for the singer, for satin and sinigang, for shears. We watch her confusion during dialysis. Ma and I whisper fierce in the midst of her begging. Lola asks me to pluck her weak bones, her kidneys. She will pay me with pennies taken from mason jars. I sit with her each time she is sewn, pieced together, needles going in and out, as Santo Niño and unfinished wedding dresses watched. Each hair a line we divined in a sketch, in a dream, a path leading, a cord binding, a rope to pull, a sheet to cover, a handkerchief to wipe blood and tears. Ma's triplets of silver and white multiply each time I see her. I pluck her silver and white hairs, each one for a penny. Thanks. So yeah, I mean, my Lola, after 1 year, she hardly had any hair, and I had a whole jar full of pennies. And I'm starting to get them, too. So, a bit touched, we might say, but what is, at first, a sign of eccentricity, with time and great works and need, becomes a marker of the holy. Take, for example, St. Francis of Assisi, for whom my own Lola gave up all color and cloth, but brown and burlap. Francis, whose bathwater was said to cure sick cows. Francis, who spoke with crickets, negotiated with starving wolves, and, according to my Lola's visions, cured Tito Ubing's rabid dog bites, kept Tita Feli's moles from morphing malignant, and saved my own mother from losing her mind the year my father died. By that time, Lola was in her 6th year of dialysis, and the burlap she wore razored burrs upon her, slicing tiny stars into her skin. Her whole body raw and exposed like a tongue. Her own tongue, a wavering of constellations, of all the things she struggled to say. Masakit, it hurts, dito, here, anak, my child, my God, Diyos ko. And this one is called Vestige. So I'm always, I would say that I became a recovering Catholic probably after adolescence. I was still mostly Catholic most of childhood. And I remember just always feeling, and I still feel this way sometimes because my mom is still very much a devout Catholic, like not being able to feel the way that she feels, but being envious of that devotion, being envious of that, supplicant, open heart. So that's sort of what this poem is trying to explore. Vestige. The creak of pews makes my knees ache, my palms and fingertips kiss. Phosphorus, censers, old mahogany, boxed wine, candle wax, old penitents close to death and God, work upon me like the inches of an old collared jumper. The poetry of worship seeps from memory to body. I confess to the air. Forgive me, air. I cannot believe. It has been 3 years since my last quiet. I hold a rosary, count its beads like the redolent string of rose petals my Lola held close when she died. After prayer, the adder of her rosary melded with the garlic bouquet of her hands, bulbous scents cradling, caressing my face. I roll each pressed round between my forefinger and thumb, keep count. My guilt, lack of conviction, rage, I am not free. I cup my tangled strand, pass it between my hands. The adder now lives in the leaf creases of my palms. The quiet whispers, scent is memory's companion. I inhale calla lilies, the yeast of Eucharist, incense, and my mother's undulating voice as she cried the prayers of the rosary at my Lola's funeral. My mother looked like artwork then, something of Bernini's, her ecstasy carved into relief by her pain. I remember cathedral light washing her face. I envied the faith she found, her ravished heart. Once an old man spoke to me of faith in dishes, how he held, washed, and dried each dish as though it were a child in his sink. The dishes themselves, and the fact that I am here washing them, are miracles. I count the day's miracles found in the sweet butter on wheat toast, the abundance of coffee, the predictability of doors opening and closing, found in the star held within an apple, in yellow ginkgos and red maples, in the sound of 8 separate rivers converged in one spot, working in one measure, in rosaries and rose petals and garlic, in vinegar and incense and wine.
I have a pair of poems called Vestigial God, and I can't not read them now that you've read your poem Vestige. So they're in very short fragments, and I'll just pause briefly between the fragments. Vestigial God, 1. Don't assume I believe in you just because I'm talking to you. Actually, I'm between gods at the moment. Saving my breath for someone who's not too rude to do his own PR. I can't go for a god who'd let himself be repped by these spit-shiny, speed-talking, cash-waving, flag-craving. I've been known to fall asleep at the wheel myself. I ask God to speak. I keep talking. What do I expect? Vestigial God 2 is a little harder to read because the second to last section has no words. So it works a lot better on the page, but I'm going to give it a try. So there'll be a longer pause and you'll know that I haven't lost my mind. I'm honoring the page. That was a terrible introduction to that poem. Vestigial God 2. I miss the certainty, the visions, singing along. Since we sexed you male. my exoskeleton. Too much carnage bears your fingerprints. All right, that's fair. There are those others. But why should you get the credit for their goodness? Still, it will rain if we wait long enough. This is called The Permanent Fragility of Meaning, and I borrowed that title from a book about music called Noise. The Permanent Fragility of Meaning. Why persist, scratching across the white field, row after row? Why repeat the ritual every morning, emptying my hands, asking for a new prayer to fold and unfold? Nothing changes. No one is saved. I walk into the day, hands still empty, and beg to be of use to someone. I lie down in the dark and beg to believe when the voice comes again with its commands, its promises. Unfold your hands. Revelation is not a fruit you pluck from trees. This is the work, cultivating the smallest shoot, readying your tongue to shape the sacred names, your mouth already filling. I lie down in the dark. I rise up and begin again. And one last very short one. I'm one of those people in a museum who sometimes will find myself talking back to the paintings. And I have found this is especially likely to happen in paintings that are full of religious imagery. So this is called museum prayer. You have left us alone long enough. What fiasco did our obedience, our silence, ever fend off? Come back. Shed your disguises. Release yourselves from oil and frame. Grace open our mouths. Walk again among, press, pierce, consume us. Do again what we cannot. Believe in us.
Okay, so I did like the saints one, and that's going to be the sinner one, and then we'll go back to God at the end. All the good stuff's in the middle, though, right? Okay. Transgression. See, we're already starting. Dog eater. Dirty chinks eat dogs. Swallow the memory of this. Moving as one, a school of children, playing at protecting Coco, Lassie, Bud, from your slow-eyed hunger, your starving teeth. Savor, swallow. Adobong aso tasted mild, like tender sweet beef stewed with garlic, peppercorns, and bay leaf singing on your tongue. Banawe's terraces and distant house lights glowed while the night grew watery and warm with a man's whispers. Mirrors of paddy water reflected his eager voice, and the moon which asked, "Did the sea ever spread itself across this height? Did the brine leave fish in the soil? Did the fish leave bright roe shining in the water?" His voice clasped your ear like the husks that hold unreaped bigas. "You are mabait and beautiful." He turned you, kind and maganda. Let the moon, let possibility linger. Wouldn't it be meat still on your breath, his face between your breasts, your legs open to this vista, your brown bodies striking, echoed across landscape? Would it wake the land's bones, the ocean waiting beneath the fertile soil? You will remember this moment as a lie, waiting with him, watching the terraces gleam like a school of fish as your bus to Manila arrived. He asked, knowing the answer, "Your husband, puti?" You boarded your bus, nodding. Yes, white. I don't know if this next one's really, I don't know, let's just go for it. Lessons in communication. If you enter a house through the window instead of the door, a ghost will follow you. If two dogs bark at night, you know the ghost wants to watch Dr. Zhivago, cry, and steal all of your wheat toast, your Earl Grey, and your butter. Should you suddenly feel a slight weight upon your chest, the ghost would like to speak with you about its concerns regarding your late-night habits. You eat dinner far too late in the evenings. You smack your gums while watching television. You are a terrible judge of character. Really, the men you bring home. You smoke too much, and you haven't been to Mass in years. Also, you no longer make an effort to speak to the dead. This, the ghost will say, is very disappointing. To hush a ghost, you must spin counterclockwise 3 times. Hold your palms upward and whistle Mancini's Moon River. You can never really make a ghost hush, but if you stand within a circle of salt, knock 3 times upon a mirror, and light a single white candle, you can manage a ghost's moaning. Order it to stay in the starlight, to stay on the other side of the window's glass. When you get lonely, you can press your ear upon the darkness and listen. Crickets, bitter, melon, gold, leaf, bull's breath, fox, glove, what, sight, tree, fall, rain, cloud, dust, dust, dust. Okay, so I have a choice. Nico case or cursive writing? Just Nico case, okay. Thank you, whoever made a decision. Hair of the dog obad. Does everybody know what an obad is? Does anybody? So an obad is basically a poem written, it's like a morning after poem, basically. And it's like lovers parting in the morning after the evening. Hair of the dog. And does everybody know what the hair of the dog is? Okay, all right. Just making sure. Feeling the room out. Okay. Hair of the dog, oh bod. Maybe it's the whiskey or Nico Case's voice. Never mind. I'm complicit, I know. It's our affair, our thin promise to do and not do this again. To suffer, threadbare as the curtains that cover the window behind you. Your mouth, a hymn. This room, too damn bright. I refuse to feign, even as you say the damned sun sings betrayal. Always, I shrug. Our duet rings like tenderness untrained, not treachery. I know that you know. Suffering's the whole point. Let's meander back to what brought us here. Doleful chords under hazy spotlight. You'll be in my arms tonight. Disco ball pedals and whiskey to steer us across a bare dance floor. There's no need to cry.
I'm ending with the sin. Given that Michelle has the last words, means we're gonna go out with God, which is probably perfect. This is called Scene Hotel Interior. He holds over his head her dress, vacant and anonymous. Her body folds, her mind a curtain dropping. The soundtrack next door, porn's percussive dialogue, laughter. The dress, a banner over his head, a blank flag, a page he turns from a script her body won't recite. A house full of locks clicks shut. Her refusal, a body between them. She takes the dress from his hand, fills the dress with her decision, wraps her arms over her clothed breasts. He empties his eyes. The dress, a mistranslated subtitle, a trailer with no feature. He offers one foot to each pant leg, accepts the sigh of his zipper. A clock gathers their silence. This is a more recent poem. It's called Will You Take This Woman? Awake again, hours before you, saturated with sweat and the scent of another infidelity. All night I loved another, someone famous or faceless. My legs sticky with it, though the body you curl around never left our bed. Another betrayal comes later when I'll stand mute in our kitchen, your good morning unanswered, as I savor his salt on my tongue, her sugar on my fingers. I keep for myself the dream world and the body I inhabit there. I won't ask whose lover you are during these hours I lie listening to you breathe. We tender our daylit minds, mortal bodies, enough to choose each other in the waking hours left us. And finally, a very short poem called Accessory. The journalist Christiane Amanpour gave an interview at one point where she was talking about her experiences as a war correspondent. And she said something that struck me. She said, when you're neutral, you're an accessory. Accessory. I report on time, avert my gaze, sing along, spend on cue, always smell clean. I tie the slip knot, sharpen the knife, count out the pills. I load the syringe, put ice in the glass, pour and pour and pour and pour. Thank you.
Okay, so I made claims for God, but I don't know if that's actually going to happen. So let's see. So I haven't, all the poems that I've read so far haven't actually been from my chapbook, but just a quick little background if you know nothing about it so that the poems kind of have more context. Basically, 22 folks went on walks with me from the Richard Hugo House to places in Seattle where they'd had their hearts broken. And these are all the walks that I went on with people. And you can see I went on one in West Seattle, so to Lincoln Park. But I guess these are sort of saint-like, but I'm just going to read two short ones from here, and then there's sort of an interactive part that I'm going to end with there. I'll tell you about it in a second. But basically, I wrote this chapbook of poems in response to the gift of the stories that people shared with me on those walks. So, two short poems. This is not a gentle poem. The larynx pinched pliers, the mouth a purple feather, a circle of mushrooms the heart, smashed glass the smile, littered along chain link. You catalog the world this way, that is to say, the man you learned to unlove taught you yourself, a new blazon, ankles as handlebars, the face a plate to lick clean, breasts uncompromising as bruises. Look to your hand become a gun. Run away on two rusted nails, and listen to the concrete cry out beneath you. And then this one's called Prayer to the Patron Saint of All Lost, Dogs, Causes, Text Messages, and Leopard Print. What's your number? Can I call? And then you might help me reclaim the boys I've lost, recover my fight for the right to party. Let me be honest. The glint of my medallions no longer sings. Ever since I began my constitutionals, I find what I most prize lost about the city. Pleather jacket, cans of tab, live goldfish, a Rolodex of texts. I really love you and reminisce much? I quote O'Hara often, which makes sense given my keenness for cigarettes and neon signs. I am the least difficult. All I want is boundless love. Of course, I pray to you, bending low my head, silently pleading for what I can't ever seem to find. The few right words, the ones that could be enough. Excuse me. So this last part, not every single walk made it into the chapbook as a poem in and of itself, but I did want to sort of commemorate every walk that I went on with folks. And so I kind of did I kind of like to think of these as like inside poems that like if you went on walk 3, you would know what I'm talking about. But, for other people, it's still sort of lyric, but maybe a little esoteric. So anyway, enough preamble. I'll just read like 2 or 3 of them. So just call out a number 1 through 22.
18.
18 and 13 is what I heard. Okay. 18. Let's start with 13. We'll go in order. House, Beacon Hill, March 2014. Mother, may I take my daughter back, or else fill this lack with static and longing and silly widening arcs of affection. 18. Farmhouse turned subdivision, East Renton Highlands, May 2014. A canopy asks, why grocery? The answer is inevitable, is a smear across a landscape of non-answers. The facts we run from wait for us at the end. Thanks.
Tonight, it's really exciting because we have 2 people reading. We have Linda, and she's going to be reading with her son Karsten, and they're from Carmelia's, which is right here in the Junction. If you've ever gone by that shop that has beautiful clothes and kind of thought, oh my gosh, when can I wear that dress?
And a free library outside.
And a free library outside. Then you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to turn it over to Linda. Please give them your attention.
Thank you very much. So this is my son Karsten. I'm Linda. My daughter Emmy is over there, and my sister Laura. I probably wouldn't have been asked to do this if I didn't have my sister Laura, because she knows Katy. And a lot of times people come in the store and they ask you to do things, and you're kind of like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. I have so much time. And so I was a little bit that way. Sorry, Katy, but I checked in with Laura, and she was like, oh my gosh, Katy's amazing, and this sounds like a great opportunity. And 2 really cool things happened by being asked to do this. The first was that I discovered I do not have a favorite poem. And so I spent hours, literally the last couple of weeks, reading poems online, looking through poetry books, reading poetry, which is, I am assuming, exactly what we all are hoping that people would do. And I subscribe to the New Yorker, but I usually go right past the poetry page. Sorry, but I won't anymore, because I have found sort of a newfound love and interest in reading poetry. But the second really even more cool thing that happened is that I realized that my 2 teenagers both had favorite poems. And so how much cooler is that as a mother of an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old to know that they have poems that they love, even though I do not. Well, I mean, I have Shel Silverstein, but that's different, which is also amazing. But so my son offered to come and read his favorite poem, and when he is done, I also have a poem that I found that I'd like to read too, as long as we have time.
All right,
So
so,
here's Karsten.
my favorite poem is Invictus by William Ernest Henley. And out of the night that covers me, black as pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
And we're supposed to say why it's
Yeah.
our favorite poem. So.
And I really like that poem because it's the feel of the poem is very dark and dire, and he knows that he's not in a good place and he's not going to a good place, but despite that he is still strong and proud, and his head is up and not bowed.
Awesome.
So, I feel like an Oscar nominee that's just fun to play. Because instead of reading it, and the winner is probably him, not me. And okay, I'll read it and then I'll tell you why. Mine, says the cat, putting out his paw of darkness. Mine, says the cat, putting out his paw of darkness. My lover, my friend, my slave. My toy, says the cat, making on your chest his gesture of drawing milk from his mother's forgotten breasts. Let us walk in the woods, says the cat. I'll teach you to read the tabloid of sense, to fade into shadow, wait like a trap, to hunt. Now I lay this plump, warm mouse on your mat. You feed me, I try to feed you. We are friends, says the cat, although I am more equal than you. Can you leap 20 times the height of your body? Can you run up and down trees, jump between roofs? Let us rub our bodies together and talk of touch. My emotions are pure as salt crystals and as hard. My lusts glow like my eyes. I sing to you in the mornings, walking round and round and round your bed and into your face. Come, I will teach you to dance as naturally as falling asleep and waking and stretching long. I speak greed with my paws and fear with my whiskers. Envy lashes my tail. Love speaks me entire, a word of fur. I will teach you to be still as an egg and to slip like the ghost of wind through the grass. The Cat's Song by Marge Piercy. And the reason that I chose that is because pretty much every other poem that I was trying to read out loud today when I was at work made me cry, because I think the coolest thing that I discovered about poetry over the last few weeks after Katy asked me to do this is that I read a lot. I read fiction, I read stories, I read nonfiction, but poetry is like this condensed moment and emotion that just is, it can be confusing and very emotional, and it's, so this was the one I could read without, bawling in front of everybody at C&D. So thank you for having us.
So Susan was saying that every WordsWest reading, there's sort of an interactive part or like less formal part where people talk about a specific thing. And I guess my thing that I'm going to talk about is how this happened. And I wrote an essay for To Sylvia's Press about that. And so I thought the more condensed way of doing that would just be to read from that and then just to answer questions you guys have about how it came about. So it was a collaborative project in many ways, because without walking with 22 different people, this would have never happened. So I'll just give you a little background on how that happened, and then you can ask me stuff about that. Does that sound good?
Right.
Okay, excellent. Thanks. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's see. I don't think you need to know those parts. Okay, so basically, fast forward to Susan had said I moved to Seattle about 2 years ago, and when I moved here, I was unemployed, and I was heartbroken. I was heartbroken and unemployed, and so I was That's just context. Upon arrival in Seattle, aside from looking for work, how else would I spend my time? I thought about how the act of walking had given me the strength to leave so many things. The relationship that had broken my heart, and the city in which it happened. How those walking conversations had been clarifying and heartening. My own heart still raw, still hurting. I thought, what if I asked other people to walk with me? What if I learned the landscape of Seattle through people's stories? What if my heart could heal in tandem with others? The development and execution of Landscape Heartbreak happened over the course of 2 years. Upon arrival in Seattle, I applied for and was ultimately rejected for a grant. However, that initial setback helped me define and refine the project's aims and led me to create my own Indiegogo campaign, which led to the creation of more texts related to the project and to more people learning about and volunteering to take part. So, for example, this, how many people have ever seen or donated to an Indiegogo campaign? Yeah, so it's basically like crowdsourcing, like, hey, I have this idea, I'm not a corporation, I'm just someone trying to make a thing happen. Will you give me $5 or $100 or however many dollars you want to give me? And then there are perks. And this was the $25 perk. And so my friend Tessa, who also did the cover for the book, basically, my mode of collaboration is being friends with lots of artists and, kind of focusing on an idea and then just being around them like, oh, well, I could do that, or, people being open. So I proofread resumes and, it's sort of like a barter sort of system. So I guess the number one way of collaborating is to be friends with artists to collaborate with, right? Because you already trust each other and you already have a sense of what that person is trying to do. Other perks that I had for the campaign were where you could have your own heartbreak session with me if you weren't in Seattle via Skype. So that was one. And then the chapbook, of course. So at that time, when the Indiegogo campaign was happening, this was not last December, but the December before. I didn't even have a publisher. I just was wanting to do this project and knew that I would write the poems and that I was using Cardio Tracker to do this, to map all of the walks. And it wasn't until after the Indiegogo campaign I met Kelly Russell Agaddon, who's one of the women who runs Two Sylvia's Press, who had actually heard about my project already from Susan, who she had heard about it because she knew me, but also she was one of the funders of, you got one of those, right? Yeah, for the Indiegogo campaign. So I guess the point of bringing all that up is just, if you want to do something, do it, and people will learn about it, and if you're really excited about it, not to say every idea you have will be funded by Indiegogo, but I just feel like people are like, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't know, I just kept telling people about it, and I was really excited about it, and even if that it didn't get funded, and even if I was just gonna make it happen myself, and so that kind of propulsion, I think, is what helped make it happen. But I was talking about the rejection. So I was rejected for several grants but when I started the project, but that rejection was really helpful because it helped me think, okay, so this isn't clear enough, or what is it that I need to think about, and so that helped me refine it further and further. And then I started getting accepted to fellowships like the Richard Hugo House Fellowship and the Jack Straw Fellowship. Those are both organizations here in Seattle. Both made this project much more legit, so that it wasn't just some random lady asking people to take them to places where they'd had their hearts broken and being like, can I put a lav mic on you and record that? I'm not a creep, I promise. It became much more legit because of applying to fellowships and different things like that. How many people in here are writers as well? Do you guys have any projects that you're working on? If you could talk about it now, and maybe somebody else in here wants to work on it with you. Everyone's shy. All right, just something to think about, because the other thing is that this project was so word of mouth. people would hear about it, or like, I went on walks with 22 different people, so it'd be like, wait, you walked from Capitol Hill to Renton? What for? And then people would hear about my project that way. So that's how a lot of the publicity for the project happened, and through like the various organizations. So I met Elizabeth actually through Jack Straw, and then she asked if I would be interested in sharing some of the poems and talking about the project on KUOW, which was like so awesome and such a big deal. And other people at the Landscape Park was a part of the Henry's summer field studies. So that happened too, again, through word of mouth. Sorry, I'm rambling here. Let me move on to the other part. Let's see. So from September 2013 to September 2014, I walked 119.92, so 120 miles with 22 people who shared a diverse range of stories, people who'd lost children and mothers and fathers and lovers, who'd been cheated on and lied to, who cheated and lied, people whose hearts were broken by false expectations, by the unkindness of others, by systemic and institutional racism and oppression, by the unexpected realities of adulthood. I had a sense at the start of the project that the poetry that would come from Landscape Heartbreak would ultimately be a chapbook. I was open to the possibility of a full-length collection. However, as I continued on the walks, the necessity of a set time frame became clear. The amount of heartbreak and the number of people who have stories to share are infinite. If I hadn't decided to limit the walks to what to happen within the span of 1 year, I would probably still be walking with people today. I wanted to be realistic about my own capacity and energy. I didn't want to diminish anyone's experience or my own, or writing in response to people's experiences due to my own exhaustion, physical or emotional. I was wary of how the project could become unwieldy emotionally and creatively if I took on too much. The idea that a chapbook is less comprehensive than a full-length collection rings false in my experience. If anything, the knowledge that I would be working with fewer pages made me prioritize and include only the strongest poems in the manuscript. As far as my process in ordering the chapbook, I don't know, you guys interested in hearing about that? Like how I ordered the chapbook? That kind of is more... Why don't I just pause, actually, and just ask if you guys have questions? Because I feel like that might be more interesting than the rest of this essay. Yes, Katy.
How long did it take you to get to Renton from?
That took, let's see, we started our walk about like 8.5 hours.
Wow.
So we walked, it was raining.
Back?
Yeah, we got a ride back, which was sort of weird. It's like really weird to take 8 hours to walk somewhere and then like 35 minutes in a car back. It's a very strange, like the accordion of time is very interesting in that way. But yeah, we walked from Capitol Hill like down, like across over to Lake Washington, and then just walked down that way. And then we walked to Renton, but we didn't stop in Renton. We went to the Highlands of Renton. So I don't know.
Why grocery?
Yeah. Why grocery? It's such a straight. That actually, I bought socks there because it was raining so hard that like we were just walking in puddles, like even though we had like rain shoes on, and it was an adventure for sure. And then the farmhouse we ended up at was being torn down. Like that was where the walk was going to end, was being torn down and turned into subdivisions. So it was even more like, whoa, that's a crazy journey. But that one was, the one you're referring to is this one right here. See that line all the way over? So that was where, yeah. And we stopped for dim sum in like Rainier Beach because we just couldn't take the rain anymore. And then we ate and then kept walking. So,
Did you ever
yeah.
feel trapped in the middle of a walk, like you didn't really want to continue?
Oh, wow, that I've never been asked that question, but that's a really good one. No, I mean, there were moments where at the beginning of one, I thought, oh God, is it going to be like that? But then it ended up not being that way. Something about walking and, like, because I walked with people who are friends of friends, and then like a couple complete strangers. And it is like a kind of awkward thing for a number of obvious reasons. But then something about like a person volunteering to do this is already in a sort of specific space with whatever trauma they wanted to talk about, and also in terms of comfort with maybe me or what my aims are for the project. So even if it might have started out initially awkward, it ended up being really lovely. And I can say I think every single walk ended with hugging. Yeah. Yep. So that didn't happen, but I was wary sometimes that maybe it was possible. Yeah, Susan.
Well, sort of on those same lines, do you have any background as a therapist, or did you have any
No.
ways of doing this to get people?
No, you guys, I'm not a professional. I just walked with these people. Not at all. I mean, I said that on my website too. That I'm not a mental health professional. But I just I have this experience, and I will walk with you if you want to walk with me. And I've been a teacher for most of my professional career, and I think that you're sort of like a on the spot, like on the fly kind of therapist in a way, and you have to be a specific kind of open heart and listener if you're a teacher. So I think that experience really helped me with this. But I think also, like, when I started the project, I was really heartbroken, and I think that being in that space, and I feel like the more healed you are, the more you forget about what it's like to be in that space. And because I was like so recently in it, it was a really beautiful and easy thing to do to like, let's focus on you. Let me not think about my thing. Like, let's focus on you, and then let's move through this together. So no professional experience, just intuition, I guess, and
A good heart.
yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yes.
So how was it to create the poems afterwards? Did you find as you're walking that you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do this? Or would it take a long time, or stuff pop right out?
Yeah, well, every poem was pretty different. And so what I did was I recorded all of the conversations. And originally I thought, oh, maybe I'll do something with this, like a podcast, or, maybe I'll do something with the content of the actual walks. But it ended up being just really useful for me to be able to listen to them again. So often what I would do if I wanted to keep working on a specific walk is I would just take the recorder and plug my headphones in, and then like just walk around by myself and listen to it again. So like the movement of my body with re-listening to the walks really helped get back into the space. And that way, like, because they were recorded, I didn't feel like I had to be like, as someone was saying something that I was like, oh, I'm going to use that in a poem, that I would be like, shh, like, wait, slow down. I didn't have to do that because I was recording it. And so that let off some of the pressure. But then as far as the writing of them, some poems I would like go home right away, like they would end and I'd be like, thank you, and then I would go home and write. And then some of them I wasn't able to do that. I'm a very social person, so sometimes I would like, and I did so many walks that it would be like I'd hang out with someone for breakfast, I'd go on a really long walk, and then I'd like have more plans. So like sometimes I wouldn't be able to write right away, and so then that was sort of interesting. That would sort of change the dynamic coming back to it, not right after the walk. So I don't know if I'm answering your question really, but they were all different. But I think that's all the time I have. Thanks for your questions.
I just love that project. And if you want to hear more of the poems from it or more conversation about it, I did feature Michelle on KUOW. So if you go to KUOW.org, you could pledge, and you could also listen to Michelle. And if you pledge this week, you will shorten the pledge drive by a day. That's a real thing. That is not a gimmick. I'm here to tell you. May I see a show of hands? How many of you have ever had to give a presentation at work? Okay. How many of you have ever given a toast at a wedding or a christening or some kind of event? Okay. How many of you have ever read a poem in public? Did anyone not raise their hand? Okay. So, but I'm going to guess that you at some point have been in the spotlight and had to speak. Is that fair in some way, shape, or form? So what I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about is some things that I've learned as a performer that I think are applicable whether you are giving a PowerPoint presentation at work, reciting a poem of someone else's or of your own, giving a toast, that there are just certain things about standing up in front of our fellow humans that are just, they freak out our central nervous system, right? There's that statistic somewhere about how the scariest thing is not dying but public speaking. I'm not sure about that research. I feel like I need to do some investigation into that. But so I was an actor before I was a writer, and I wanted to be an actor since I was about 8 years old. So I was an actor during my teens, during my 20s, and I was not one of those actors who really struggled with stage fright. I just loved performing and worked really hard and enjoyed that. And then when I stood up to read my own poems, the most horrible things would happen. Like my kneecaps would shake up and down uncontrollably. And my mouth would become so dry that my lips would stick to my teeth and I could barely speak. And I was so puzzled by why was this happening? Why was I so incapable of speaking? And then I had an epiphany about why it was so much more difficult to speak my own work. I felt like I was being judged when I stood up. And I felt like that it was about me. And it occurred to me at one point, and I wish I knew exactly how this had happened, because this would be a better story if I could remember all the details. But at some point it occurred to me that when I stood up to read a poem, I was not the point. The poem was the point. And my job as the reader of the poem is to speak it in such a way that it will move out into the room and the listener will connect to the poem in a way that might be moving or useful or powerful for them. And that my job is only 50% of it. That when I speak the poem, you meet it with your attention, your imagination, your life experience. You co-create the poem. And once I understood that I could just be in service to that possibility, I stopped getting so debilitatingly nervous. I developed a little mantra that I would remind myself, and I think it's useful whether you're standing up to present an idea to your colleagues or to honor someone you love with a toast at a wedding. And the little mantra is this: the performance requires me, but it's not about me. I have to show up. I have to be the vehicle, so I am required. But it's not about me. I'm not the point. And if you look at the reading copy of any of my chapbooks or my book, you'll find various places in the book where I've written, the performance requires you, but it's not about you, or breathe, or feet on the ground. And these are just little reminders to myself that I'm the instrument of those poems moving into the room, but I'm just the vehicle, I'm not the point. So that's my little bit of lessons learned that I have to offer you. With the few minutes that we have left, I just want to open the floor. Are there questions you have for me about why we have a poet laureate, what I'm doing as the poet laureate, questions about anything you heard tonight? I want to make sure and give a chance for you to ask any questions you may have. Yeah.
So what does that mean to be a poet laureate, and what do you do to be a poet laureate?
Sure. So in our state, it's a job. It's an honor to get the job, but it's very much a job. So the person in our state who's selected as the poet laureate is someone who has applied to be that role. So it's a fairly involved application where you propose what you would do. What's the audience you would be trying to reach? What would you offer them? Why do you think it's important to be an advocate or an ambassador for poetry? So when I applied, I spoke about the work that I've been doing over the last number of years at Children's Hospital and my understanding that lots of people who don't have poetry in their lives are hungry for what poetry offers. Our favorite poem person is an example of that when people are exposed to contemporary poetry or even to poetry of the past, they realize that poetry is part of our human heritage. It's part of our human birthright. And we all need what poetry offers us. So I'm going around the state. I'm going to all 39 counties. I've been to 27 so far. And I am doing readings and offering free poetry writing workshops, generative workshops, so people have a chance to read a few poems. We talk about them together, and then we use one of those poems as a springboard to writing a poem of our own. And those are really, really fun to do. And part of what I'm also doing, I hope, is that by gathering the people together in a particular community who are open to that, they then meet each other. So I'm going to go back to Seattle, but they now know who each other is. And I got a wonderful email after I'd done a workshop at the library in DuPont down near the Joint Base Lewis McChord, JBLM, that group that met at the library, they now are meeting once a week at the library to read their work to each other. So that's the best that it can be, is when that community is starting there. So that's what I'm up to, and that's what the Poet Laureate does. Thanks. Yeah.
What have you been, what's the work you've been doing at Children's Hospital?
So I've been at Children's for about 17 years doing various kinds of jobs in the marketing department. Right now I write for the hospital's website, but I also partner with the pastoral care program. And so twice a month I offer an open session for the staff. And if you have questions about those, if I can put you on the spot, Penny Peffley over here is a nurse at the hospital who I met through those sessions. And I bring a couple of poems to read out to the people who are there, and then I offer a writing prompt based on those poems. And we write together for about 10 minutes, and then the half hour is done, and people go back to their whatever it is they do for the hospital. I also will do occasional sessions for different staff groups. Tomorrow I'm meeting with a group of social workers at the hospital for an hour. I do, every month I do an hour with the hospital's palliative care team, the folks who are working with children and families who are at the end of life. So it's a tremendous honor to be able to spend time with folks who are doing that direct patient care work, and to try to offer something that will help nourish and sustain them, which is the point of what I do there. Yeah, thanks for asking. You have been a wonderful audience. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Katy, Harold, Susan, for welcoming us. Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.